I'm Morgan. I'm a vegan life and wellness coach, and today I want to talk to you a bit about why dairy is cruel and why vegans avoid dairy. So there's a lot of different reasons to avoid dairy, right? There's health ones, there's environmental, but today's video is going to focus on the ethical aspects of it. And I would argue that dairy is one of the cruelest industries out there. So if you're coming to this video and you're not sure if you want to stick around for this, I want you to know that it's going to be the Coles Notes version. It's not going to be too graphic, but it's going to be honest. And if you're really questioning whether or not you can stick around for this, but you are eating cheese or milk, you need to ask yourself, if it's not good enough for my ears and eyes, why is it good enough for my mouth and my stomach? And with that, I'll say goodbye. Go. Just think about it. So before we get into it, I want to just say there is exceptions to everything in life. I'm going to talk a bit about factory farming and what that looks like, and what is the general consensus and the general treatment that these animals endure, and what are standard practices. So if you know someone that has like a small family farm and they don't do this, that's great. But they're still problematic. They're not the problem, but they're still problematic. There's still other factors at play. But just know that if you're going into the grocery store and you're picking up like a top brand of dairy, that's what you're buying. You're buying factory farmed animals. So just try and keep that in mind. There's always going to be exceptions, but exceptions don't change the rule, which is that it's a cruel industry. So let's kind of get into what that looks like. Something that a lot of people don't know is that, dairy is breast milk. And when I say breast milk, I don't just mean that it's from the breast of a cow. I mean, it's milk, just like a human produces milk. We produce it for our young, and that's the same reason that cows produce milk. There's no such thing really as dairy cows. I know a lot of people think that these cows just produce milk, like that's what they do and that's the breed. But that's not the case. They produce milk because they're pregnant. And these cows are forcibly impregnated. And, they're forced to become pregnant again and again and again to keep that milk constantly producing. So it's very hard on them and hard on their bodies. But beyond that, there's the calf to think about, right? So what do you do when all you want is the milk and you have all these calves? So typically, a calf is taken away within the first 48 hours. And if it's female, it may end up going into the dairy industry like mom. Repeated pregnancies, being hooked up, and being milked all day, that whole process. If it's male, it'll be sent off to the veal industry, maybe live for a few weeks, kind of get fattened up. They'll give it some sort of dairy substitute because they won't give it mom's milk, because that's for us, of course. And if they don't go that route, they'll just dispose of the male, because in some countries it's cheaper. Rather than feed them and sell them at a cheap price, it's cheaper to just, bolt gun them and toss them away as waste. And that's really kind of sad, right? If you think about that. And that's the cycle. And I don't know if you've ever seen a dairy cow chasing their young right there. It's traumatic. It's emotional, for the cow, and even for people to watch that and to have to go through that and do that to these animals. And this cycle continues with the female cows, and often they're milked so much that they start to bleed from their udders and they get infections. And of course that comes down into our milk and into our cheese, though you'll be happy to hear there is an acceptable pus to milk ratio before it can come out to the market. So there's only a little bit of pus in your milk. So these cows continue this cycle until they're about 5 years old, or they just collapse. And at 5 years old, they'll be shipped off to the meat industry, hamburger probably, and that's it. And there's just these new cows that are replacing it, and we just take from their bodies until they can't give anymore, and then dispose of them. As a mother, the idea of having your children taken away from you and your milk stolen, and to repeat that cycle with multiple calves to only then end up in slaughter in the end sounds horrifying. It's torture. And like I said, I would argue that it's the cruelest industry that there is. If you haven't checked out Dairy is Scary, the dairy industry explained in 5 minutes, I'll leave the description below. That's a really great rundown. It's a little bit graphic, it's a little bit vulgar, but it's to the point. And I think it's really important for you to experience that and to see that, especially if you've been holding on to cheese, because there's so much more at play here. And look also into the environmental effects and the health effects, because when you look at the full picture, you can really see that giving up cheese isn't as hard as it seems. The idea of continuing to eat cheese after knowing these things is hard. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, or you want to know more, you want other resources, just reach out to me and I'm happy to provide them to you. So thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.